more than half of their income on rent. KSL News Radio's Alessandra Gurr reports.
21.7% of renters in Salt Lake spent over half their household income on rent last year, according to data from the CDC. The report shows high housing prices are affecting renters across the nation, with over half spending 30% or more of their total income on rent last year. Ogden has one of the lowest percentages, according to the report, with just under 18% of renters paying more than half their income on housing.
The data shows over 25% of renters across the nation are spending more than half their income on housing costs. And let's take a look at the stock market right now. The Dow Jones average has settled back not just to below zero, but down 43 points on the day right now, while the NASDAQ is still up by about 21 points. Coming up, we'll see sunshine through the rest of the day, and that's next. KSL News Time 101.
You know what's great about KSL's traffic coverage? Trained traffic reporters and real listeners.
Trading information and making the commute safer and faster for everyone.
Every 10 minutes on the nines, we have you covered on KSL News Radio.
This is the day of the big sale at your gift shop.
Welcome in.
So this isn't just a big day for your business. It's a big day for the network keeping it all connected. That is, if it can handle the pressure.
Next in line, please.
So is it possible to get business internet you can really count on? It is. With 99.9% network reliability from Comcast Business. It's like this neat little bow.
Do you like that gift wrap?
Really ties it all together. Reliable internet for your business. It's not just possible. It's happening. Comcast Business. Powering possibilities.
Switch to Comcast Business and get started with reliable internet and advanced security for $49.99 a month for 12 months with a 2-year agreement. Plus, ask how to get up to a $500 prepaid card with a qualifying internet package. Don't wait. Call or go online to switch today. Offer ends 9/22/24. Restrictions apply. New customers only with 150 megabit per second internet. Eagle bill and auto pay required. Equipment, taxes, and fees extra. After 12 months, regular rates apply.
Offer not valid in all states or where prohibited by law. Loans are subject to lender approval. See website for details.
Meet Brian. He just got $5,000, and it was pretty easy. I'll tell you how in 10 seconds. Brian needed cash help. After being rejected by banks, he tried 27cash.com. Told them how much he needed, even let them know he had bad credit. In minutes, 27cash.com found a lender who deposited $5,000 into his bank account the very next day. If you need cash help, even if you have bad credit, go to 27cash.com. 27cash.com.
You might wonder, John Legend, how do you keep your voice sounding so legendary? Honey. And how do I keep my protection against COVID-19 up to date? With a COVID shot this season, designed for recent variants.
You can get your COVID-19 shot when getting your flu shot if you're due for both, as recommended by the CDC.
The fresher, the better.
Ask your healthcare provider about getting this season's COVID-19 shot when getting your flu shot.
Sponsored by Pfizer.
Traffic and weather brought to you by Sinclair's DinoPay app. Save up to 20 cents per gallon. And here's Ricky Meese.
We had a stalled vehicle in traffic westbound on the 21st South Freeway, about 3200 west, blocking a right lane. Looks like they have been able to get it pulled off of the freeway, opening up that lane, but there's still some backups that remain. Murdoch Hyundai is celebrating 3 brand new dealerships with 1.99% for 5 years on the Tucson or Elantra. Murdoch Hyundai in Logan, Linden, and Murray. MurdochHyundai.com. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
Partly cloudy and cool with a chance of rain today, a high 71, mid-70s through the rest of the week. 70 degrees and partly cloudy right now. I'm Dan Bomas from the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios. Listen online at kslnewsradio.com. We're Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
In the midst of a contentious election cycle and as a constitutional republic at a crossroads, it's time to think again at the principles and the kind of leaders our nation actually needs. Let's begin.
Think you know the news of the day? Think again with Boyd Matheson on KSL News Radio.
It's always fascinating to me that as we look at where we have been as a nation and where we are, we're always saying that what we need is a leader. But sometimes it's not the leader that we think we want or even the leader that we think we need. Often it's those that just provide stability, who serve as a bridge from one generation to the next, or those who are simply willing to do the hard work and heavy lifting of governing, doing the job they're elected to do, to build a stronger and more certain path for our constitutional republic. Well, one of those, Making the Presidency, John Adams, a fabulous new book out by Linda Chervinsky, Executive Director of the George Washington Presidential Library. She's authored great books on American presidents. And this latest book is one I encourage you to check out because this is one of those presidents in our history that gets the short shrift just a little bit, kind of the in-between Washington and Jefferson mode. But there were crucial lessons, vital principles that were deployed by John Adams that we want to explore today. And Linda, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right. And Lindsay, as you began this whole journey with John Adams, first, what drew you to John Adams? He is kind of one of those forgotten in-between guys, but one who I think, as you so eloquently put in the book, Lindsay, is a powerful one, an important one, not only for then, but actually for today as well.
Oh, I completely agree. So what really drew me to John Adams was actually writing about Washington first and then trying to figure out how all of the things that he had established as precedents, how they actually became that thing that a lot of other presidents would do as well. And that required repetition and the determination of Adams to ensure that the powers of the presidency and the character of the presidency reflected what Washington had created. That was really what drew me to this subject.
Yeah. We always say you never want to be the guy to follow the guy or the girl to follow the girl. And following George Washington, no small task. And yet John Adams did some things Washington didn't leave a whole lot of a roadmap or a superstructure for John Adams, but he worked on that. Describe that for us.
He did. He followed Washington's example whenever possible, but his first contribution was just showing up because everyone knew that whoever came second was really going to have a hard time. And it took a great deal of courage for him to do so. And then he set about trying to establish peace with France. The United States and France were in what was called the quasi-war, which was basically not a fully declared naval war, but pretty close. And in doing so, he defended the president's right to establish foreign policy without the input or without the sort of power sharing arrangement between the cabinet and Congress and the presidency. So he really asserted that the president had the right to do so on his own.
And I think that's such an important piece of that. And, of course, that led to a lot of contention. We talk about some of the challenges we have today in a polarized country. It was a smaller country, and there were a lot of different factions that were on there. And he had to also deal, we always say, Hamilton got a musical, Jefferson got a monument, and then you had people like Adams trying to navigate the in-between. And what are the lessons that we should learn in that in-between from John Adams?
Well, I think one of the things that we should definitely take away is that sometimes we really want our presidents to exercise restraint. It's not really as splashy as some of the other big things, but it's really important in moments of constitutional uncertainty and constitutional crisis. The second thing that I think we want to learn from John Adams is that sometimes presidents have to do things that make them a little bit unpopular or make them unpopular with their own party. But we want them to be independently minded and to be willing to put the Constitution and the nation's interests above their own political interests. And that was something that John Adams did. The last thing that I think Adams demonstrates is that for the peaceful transfer of power, which is really the bedrock of our American democracy, it requires both participants to be very attentive to the character of that transition, to be mindful about doing everything to pass information in a way that will help the next person, to cooperate, to ensure that it remains peaceful. Because at least in the beginning, none of that was written down. And today, so much of it still really does depend on the goodwill of those involved.
Yeah, no question about that. And I love you get to the restraint portion. Restraint always works, and it's so crucial in a constitutional republic that you have leaders that do that and then also have that political courage. I would always ask people thinking about running for office, the last question was always, what will make all of this worth it, even if you lose? Or what decision would you be willing to make, even if it cost you 4 more years or another election cycle? Because I think leaders who can't answer that question really shouldn't be in the office to begin with, because you have to know those things going in, or then when those things do come up, it's too late and you're looking at your consultants and your pollsters to try to figure out what to do rather than doing what's right based on those principles.
It's such a great point, especially for the presidency, because the easy decisions don't get to them. The decision comes to them when things are really hard and no one else can figure it out. And so they have to have a very clear sense of their principles and their values, which is not to say that they shouldn't, learn and change their mind when faced with new information. But there have to be bedrock principles like the Constitution comes first before a political party in order for it to actually work.
We always say that when the sun is out and the breeze is light and the sea is calm, every boat in the harbor has a great captain. but when the wind starts howling and the wind starts blowing, you find out if you have a captain. And we've had some of those moments. And I think John Adams navigated that in such a unique way. One of the other things, Lindsay, that we always talk about on this show is that people, I think, should always be introduced or described not by their resume or by their list of achievements, but by their principles. And I think you've done a beautiful job in this book. Give us one or two of the principles that you think drove the things that Adams was actually able to do as president that are still important for us today.
Well, Adams was, as I said, very committed to the survival of the republic. His entire family really saw it as their family project. He spent his entire career basically trying to create this great experiment and then ensure it survived. So that was his guiding light. And with that guiding light, he was very dedicated to neutrality, which should not be confused with isolationism, because he believed in the importance of trade and intellectual engagement. But he understood that Britain and France had been fighting wars for centuries, and it had nothing to do with the United States, and they did not care about American interests. And so he was determined to try and protect American interests and avoiding wars that were unnecessary to the nation's best interests, them himself. So that was that neutrality was a really important principle. And then the last one I would say was he cherished the fact that people accused him of being too independent. Hamilton said he was too independent. He was not enough of a party man. And Adams loved that about himself. He thought that that was such a good quality for a president, because you don't want someone to always toe the party line. And so I think that's probably something that we want our presidents to do today as well. And he sets a very good model.
I am so glad you landed on that point, Lindsay, because we always challenge people to think again, and we should really think again about what we think we know about John Adams. Those principles are the ones that we all should be thinking about, especially in the times we're living in right now. Lindsay Chervinsky, Executive Director of the George Washington Presidential Library, also author of a fabulous new book, and it will cause you to think again about what you think you know about John Adams and what he did, the legacy he left, and why it is so important today. Lindsay, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
All right. Again, that's Lindsay Chervinsky, Executive Director of the George Washington Presidential Library. And this is a fabulous book. This is a great read. And one of the things that Lindsay has pointed out is that as Americans, we often need to be reminded how precious and how fragile our republic actually is. And that it takes people of principle, not just those in the headlines. It's not just the Washingtons, the Jeffersons, and the Lincolns, but it's a lot of people like John Adams who didn't have a lot of guidance or direction, but were willing to stick with the principle and stay with the conversation to help really fortify a fledgling nation, to ensure peaceful transfer of power, and that the republic would continue on. A lot of fabulous and important things for us to think again about today, especially about John Adams. We'll be right back.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson. The safeguards for a former president don't feel very safe.
The acting director of the Secret Service says he's ordered a paradigm shift within the agency to move the service's protective mission from a reactive model to a readiness model.
The agency charged with protecting our country's leaders is looking at every angle and hopefully stopping things from getting this far. We have analysis all day, so when you're in your car, listen to KSL News Radio at 102.7 FM.
Introducing Peach Doors and Windows. Are you ready to upgrade your home with stunning new doors but are overwhelmed with how to begin? Peach Doors is here to make the entire process smooth and stress-free. Visit their showroom to see their wide selection of wood doors, durable fiberglass, energy-efficient aluminum, oversized glass bifold doors, and so much more. It's not just about looks, it's about durability and security to protect what matters most. Let them help you find the perfect match for your home, budget, and personal style. Visit their showroom and see for yourself. No pushy sales tactics, only guidance from their experienced staff. No inflated markups just to offer so-called discounts. See their 5-star reviews where customers rate them on their attention to detail through every step of the sale and installation process. Amazing home transformations begin with windows and doors. Serving Logan to St. George, just Google Peach Building to see for yourself.
Before you take another injection or another weight loss pill, can you listen for just a second? We just want to talk to you about Soda weight loss because I was with you. I was so frustrated. I thought, I want to lose this weight and lose this weight fast. I don't want to live one more day like this. But then I realized, but I want to be healthy for the rest of my life, not just for the next year or two while I'm taking these pills. With Soda weight loss, I lost 34 pounds in less than 3 months. It's really sustainable, which is what Tyler says.
I would recommend Soda because it's sustainable. This is lifetime change. I would recommend Soda because it works.
And look, most people, if they go the injection route or the pill route, end up gaining that weight and some on the other side of it. That's not going to happen with Soda weight loss because they change the way you look at food. You're going to keep that weight off, and isn't that your real goal? Find out more. Go to sodaweightloss.com. It's spelled SOTA, and it stands for State of the
Art.
Tommy! I can't wait for golf this weekend, huh, buddy? Time flies. Love you, man. Oh, don't forget your knee brace again. We aren't in college anymore.
Moments together matter, so help protect yourself from RSV. If you're 75 or older or 60 plus with a chronic condition like asthma, COPD, heart disease, or severe diabetes, you're at higher risk of landing in the hospital from RSV, and there are no prescription RSV treatments. Check eligibility and schedule your RSV vaccine at vaxassist.com. Sponsored by Pfizer.
Tommy! I can't wait for golf this weekend, huh, buddy? Time flies. Love you, man. Oh, don't forget your knee brace again. We aren't in college anymore.
Moments together matter, so help protect yourself from RSV. If you're 75 or older or 60 plus with a chronic condition like asthma, COPD, heart disease, or severe diabetes, you're at higher risk of landing in the hospital from RSV, and there are no prescription RSV treatments. Check eligibility and schedule your RSV vaccine at vaxassist.com. Sponsored by Pfizer.
September means it's time for Any Hour Services free furnace sale. What's up, everybody? I'm Mike Wilson with Any Hour Services, and as summer comes to a close and falls right around the corner, the weather gets, well, perfect. And when the weather's perfect, people need a little extra incentive to replace their heating and cooling system. That's where Any Hour Services free furnace sale comes in. For the month of September, when you have Any Hour Services install a new air conditioner, we'll give you a new furnace for just the cost to install it. About $400. The furnace is free, you just pay the labor. And there's no catch. There's no raising the price on the air conditioner first. There's no making you buy the most expensive air conditioner to qualify. There's none of that. There's just a desire to keep our technicians working while the weather's mild and a genuine appreciation of you for helping us keep them busy. So if you've been thinking about replacing your old furnace and air conditioner and want to know exactly how much you can save during our free furnace sale, call Any Hour Services today and schedule a free estimate. Google Any Hour Services or schedule online at anyhourservices.com. No one helps more homeowners than Any Hour Services.
Common Spirit Health. Hospitals, clinics, and caregivers all connected to advance healthcare in Colorado, Kansas, and Utah. Healthcare with human kindness is here. Hello, human kindness.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, the Federal Reserve announced a 0.5% cut in its most important interest rate today. The stock market reacted instantly. Second, more than 20% of renters in the Salt Lake City market are spending more than half their income on rent each month. And third, Senator Mike Lee wants to see better security provided for former President Trump. 70 degrees, partly cloudy in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Hear elevated conversation on crucial issues. Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources.
Welcome back to Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. Great to be with you today, as always. I am Boyd Matheson. Of course, a big headline of the day, interest rate cut. What does that actually mean? How does it impact you? What happens around your kitchen table and in community? What are the effects going to be? How do we expect that to play out? I think not just between now and the election, which I know a lot of people are focused on, but this is going to take a year to 18 months to play all the way out. And so we want to get underneath the headlines just a little bit. So we're really thrilled to have joining us on the program today, Carrie Wasden, a finance expert and professor of finance with our friends down at Utah Valley University. And Professor, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me.
All right, so break this down for us. A half a point is a significant one. They haven't done that for a very long time. And so give us your sense in terms of why not go with kind of the standard issue 0.25 cut as opposed to going to the full half?
That's a great question. And the media in general has been in a very recent conversion that this is going to move from 25 basis points to 50. And they did come through at 50. And so we see that as a bigger move, but in reality, it is the most common move.
Mm.
So the most common first move off of peak rates is 50 basis points.
All right.
So in perspective, we're getting what was more common. The last one, which was during the pandemic, was only 25 basis points, but we were really uncertain what we were stepping into with the pandemic, and so that uncertainty caused us to be in a little bit more tepid water.
Yeah.
But 50 is the norm.
Yeah, and so break that down for us a little bit in terms of what that does. What is that going to do in terms of impact in the short term first, and then we'll kind of look down the road.
You know, shorter term, it causes the justification for higher priced assets to be warranted. So stocks respond relatively well. Initially, as soon as the news came out, stocks were up 200 points. They're now down a little bit. And so the gut response is a trader response. It's a response to taking advantage of the difference between expectation and reality. In the longer term, though, there's really two questions that I think we should focus on. Number one is, why did they feel they could do this? And the second one is, why did they feel they had to do it? They felt they could because inflation had come down. Now, most people don't feel like inflation's down because our target point is the pre-pandemic world of prices versus the post-pandemic world for prices, and it's just a lot higher.
Mm.
But the reality is the rate of increase of prices has come down significantly. And that gives the Federal Reserve the license to be less restrictive.
Yeah.
So why did they feel they had to do it? Was that the labor market is softening. And despite the fact that the economy is doing remarkably well, retail sales are high, home prices are high, all of these fundamental aspects that are characteristics of a strong economy are there. But the labor market is beginning to soften up a little bit. Now, that's not a catastrophic thing, because what you're finding is we are actually moving from a really unusual period, which we experienced during the pandemic, to something that's more in line with normal.
Mm. Yeah.
So the Federal Reserve, I think, gets real comfortable that, look, inflation seems to be not mastered, not mission accomplished, but in hand, and the economy is still strong. So they don't want to be too restrictive, which they are. Before this move, they were too restrictive. So they don't want to be in that position, so they pulled the throttle back on the rates a little bit, and are going to try and let the economy find its footing.
Yeah. And so as that starts to play out, you really framed something that I'd love to have you unpack, and that is there are a lot of good indicators as you rattled those off. It's like, yep, that's a good thing, that's a good thing, that's a good thing. And yet there's this perception or disconnect that you alluded to that a lot of people are saying, wait a minute, I'm still paying way more for groceries or gas or trying to get a home or whatever it may be. And so kind of walk us through what this process looks like. We always talk about the soft landing or the hard bounce or the bumpy road or whatever it's going to be this round. How do you see that, and what should we be thinking about beyond just the headlines and what most people are hitting today?
No, that's a great question, and it's hard to unpack easily, but let me just try and make a few pieces. What happens when you lower interest rates? Well, obviously the easy ones are things that you buy with credit are now going to be cheaper. cars, washing machines, credit cards, all of those things are now going to be easier for you to manage. But there's an odd phenomenon that we have only experienced during the pandemic, which is really interesting, and that is, we've had this period where mortgage rates have gone up to over 8%.
Right.
And yet house prices have also gone up. That's the weird part. That doesn't usually happen. So normally when interest rates are going up, you don't want to buy a house because it's too expensive. So that not buying a house creates a lot of inventory in the housing market and prices go down. Didn't experience that. It's the opposite.
Yeah.
We have higher interest rates and prices went up, which made it so people didn't sell. So you felt trapped in your home. Here I am in a home. I could sell. I can't afford another one because the prices are higher and the rates are higher.
Right.
And now you start to get lower rates. So what does that do? Very counterintuitive. But what this does now is it allows you to say, I can sell my house because the price is high because I can now buy one at lower rates. And so my mortgage payments are going to be lower.
Yeah.
So what that does is that starts to put a little bit of grease into the housing market and increase slowly. This is not a flood. This is going to be a trickle. Increases slowly the number of housing units that are in the market and starts to finally get our housing system back into an equilibrium. It's been tough to find and buy and afford a house.
Yeah, that has been super tough sledding for a while now, and so I think that greasing, as you said, someone mentioned today, it's like turning on the faucet, and it just takes about a year to start trickling in terms of the water coming through the pipe, and that's a great perspective there. Well, fantastic look at all of that. Great looking at underneath the headlines and beyond the numbers. Kerry Wasden, finance expert and professor of finance at Utah Valley University. And Professor Wasden, we appreciate you joining us. Great perspective, wonderful insight, and we look forward to having you back.
Thanks.
All right. Again, that's Professor Kerry Wasden from Utah Valley University. And I love getting into the nuance of some of these things because some of them are a little counterintuitive. And I think he raised the one area there as it relates to housing that has been a little bit of a head scratcher and a little troubling for a lot of folks. And that is that even as those interest rates went up, the prices were also going up. And so it made it just impossible for a lot of people to move out of a particular house because they were sort of trapped. They could sell it, prices were good, but interest rates were so high and the market demand was still so high that they couldn't afford to get into another house. So that's going to be one of those indicators that we're going to continue to monitor and watch, because I think that's going to be one, as he said, kind of greases the skids a little bit and maybe creates a little shift and some settling in terms of that housing market. And then, of course, from a political standpoint, I think this is the interesting one in terms of what both campaigns for the presidency are going to do. And it's really interesting. The Trump campaign, I think, will continue to say, look, it's still up over 6% in terms of a mortgage. When I was in, it was 3%. Life was better. Things were good. Vote for me. For the Harris campaign, I think this will feel like a little bit of a momentum shift in terms of, hey, we cut it 0.50. That's a good thing. And so we're doing things that are helping you in the economy. The problem, I think, for the Harris campaign is going to be the fact, this slow trickle effect in terms of when it actually reaches the voters and the day-to-day citizens. And so they may tout the job market. They may tout what's going on, interest rates coming down and inflation and so on. But they're still not going to be hitting it square where the American people are living and how they're feeling it each day. So a lot of interesting challenges for both sides. There'll be a lot of points to be made. We'll continue to watch it all here on Inside Sources. We'll step aside for some bottom-of-the-hour news. Don't go anywhere. More Inside Sources is coming up next.
It's 1:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top story this hour, the Utah Hockey Club getting ready for their first preseason game on Sunday. The team president of hockey operations, Chris Armstrong, says all the enthusiastic new fans make them want to put the best product they can out on the ice.
It's been extraordinary. It's been humbling. I don't think any of us have ever been a part of anything like it. To be honest with you. And we want to pay it forward. We want to pay it back to the fans.
The team plays its first preseason game against the St. Louis Blues Sunday night at 5. The first preseason game in the Delta Center is Monday against the LA Kings. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. The Federal Reserve announced a cut in interest rates today, and ABC's Derek Dennis reports.
The half-point cut is larger than a quarter-point cut many analysts had expected, and it signals an aggressive move by the Fed in its ongoing effort to tamp down on inflation. Many say it's a real milestone for the U.S. economy, a victory in a sense because it could start a trend by the Fed to gradually lower interest rates over the next year. Car and mortgage loans, credit card interest, all expected to get cheaper with this Federal Reserve rate cut. Derek Dennis, ABC News.
Your money at this moment. The Dow Jones average has been bouncing up and down since that announcement. Right now standing at 98 points higher than the start of trading today. The NASDAQ is right now 103 points higher. And our KSL weather. A partly cloudy day and fairly cool. That's next. KSL News Time, 1:31.
We hope you have the right app on your phone for news. You probably have dozens.
But the KSL News Radio app, well, it makes our live stream super easy.
Plus, our talk shows are right there as podcast for your workday.
That's the app for KSL News Radio.
The KSL News Radio movie show comes to My Hearing Centers this Friday from 10 to 1. But first, discover what My Hearing Centers can do for you. My Hearing Centers uses advanced technology to diagnose and treat hearing loss. These comprehensive evaluations determine the best treatment options. Then enjoy lifetime support with regular check-ins, cleaning, and maintenance. Call My Hearing Centers at 801-701-1629. 801-701-1629 for more details. My Hearing Centers has offices from Ogden to St. George.
We just want to have enough money for retirement.
And travel to visit our grandchildren.
I understand. That's why at Fisher Investments, we start by getting to know each other, so I can learn about your family, lifestyle, goals, and needs, allowing us to tailor your portfolio.
What about commission-based products?
We don't sell those. We're a fiduciary, obligated to act in your best interest.
So how do your management fees work?
We have a simple management fee based on the value of your portfolio, so we do better when you do better.
We appreciate that kind of transparency.
We also check in with you regularly to keep you up to date on the markets and your portfolio.
What other services do you offer?
As a client, you have access to resources on investing, financial planning, estate planning, Social Security, Medicare, and more.
Wow, it sounds like Fisher Investments has everything we need.
At Fisher Investments, we're clearly different. Learn more at FisherInvestments.com.
Investing in securities involves the risk of loss.
Don't you love this time of year? Fabulous fall colors amongst the Red Rock Views and Cedar Breaks and Dixie National Forest. You should take a drive where you will no doubt enjoy 4 scenic highways, connecting you to the most amazing fall colors you'll ever see. Time to put the you back in Utah, because it's all about the journey you create. This fall, see you in Cedar City. Start your journey at this year's Utah Shakespeare Festival, now through the fall, featuring 4 incredible plays. Do you like nature? Take a hike, go mountain biking, or OHVing in Bryan Head. You'll enjoy many fun fall events, like the charm of an organic farmer's market. And be sure you include a visit to the best pumpkin patches in the West. You will definitely get it all this fall in Cedar City, putting the you back in Utah and Cedar City. To plan your journey and for Cedar City's updated fall color report, activities, and cool foodie places to go, visit cedarcity.com. cedarcity.com.
Traffic and weather together brought to you by Sinclair's DinoPay app. Save up to 20 cents per gallon. And here's Ricky Meese.
We've had a quiet drive in progress on the Valley freeways right now. No accidents, no delays. You do want to remember that there is road work blocking traffic if you're trying to transition from Highway 40 to go westbound on I-80 in Summit County. You can plan for possible delays. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
Partly cloudy and cool with a chance of rain today. High 71, mid-70s through the rest of the week. And it's 68 degrees under mostly cloudy skies right now. I'm Dan Bomas from the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios. Listen online at kslnewsradio.com for Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources.
Inside Sources.
America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Well, the war on poverty is a never-ending one, and even with poverty among American children at a near all-time low, the interesting things still remain that children who are born into poverty still have a high chance of ending up there in the end. In a new volume, Doing Right by Kids, Leveraging Social Capital and Innovation to Increase Opportunity, Scott Winship lays out a roadmap to make sure our children's future is brighter and that tomorrow is better than today. Great guest and great friend of the show, Scott Winship, Senior Fellow and the Director of the Center on Opportunity and Social Mobility at the American Enterprise Institute, where he searches and researches social mobility and the cause and effects of poverty. And Scott, welcome back to the show.
Yeah, great to be back, Boyd. Appreciate it.
This volume is an amazing thing, and you got great tag team partners. Yuval Levin, Ryan Streeter. That is the dream team, I think, to be sure, when it comes to social capital and upward mobility. But give us kind of the baseline of where you started on this particular volume in terms of where are we? Obviously, things are doing a little better, but there's still a long way to go.
Yeah, that's right. I think we were struck by a couple different facts. You know, as you said, and I don't think it's widely appreciated, but child poverty, in the last 3, 4, 5 years has been at an all-time low in the United States, which in some ways is a testament to the safety net that we've got. I think it's a testament to welfare reform in the 1990s that actually changed some of the incentives around working. But at any rate, we're doing a pretty good job on child poverty. But at the same time that we've reduced child poverty rates, we, on the one hand, have upward mobility from one generation to the next that hasn't improved at all, and by some measures, it's gotten worse over time. And then you have this whole set of social problems related to social capital around family decline, kind of disinvestment in community life, declining trust in civic institutions. And so we wanted to kind of refocus conservatives particularly on addressing these other problems that aren't poverty, upward mobility and declining social capital. And so we put together an all-star lineup to try to tackle a bunch of different topics. Some of them are, I think, more conventionally conservative friendly than others. And really happy with how it turned out.
Yeah, it is great stuff. And I think it's so interesting that I just want to go back and let people just think this through in terms of, okay, we've child poverty has never been lower, but upward mobility hasn't changed trajectory. And to me, it's always about the upward mobility part of the equation, because sometimes I think as we look at it and sometimes we see that, throwing more money at it is kind of a strategy, or more programs at it is a strategy. But it seems that part of what you're showcasing in this volume is that if you're giving people just enough to stay exactly where they are, there is no upward mobility and no opportunity. And to me, that's what is undermining a lot of the hope and trust in a lot of these institutions.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think if your goal is to, get as many people as possible below kind of an arbitrary poverty line, above an arbitrary poverty line, then, the most direct way to do that is to just give people more money. The problem with that is that if you give people cash without any conditions attached to it, then that comes with some bad incentives. Work disincentives, for instance, for the parents. Marriage disincentives. Parents have less incentive to invest in themselves or their kids. Kids grow up in communities where a lot of people have gotten used to relying on the state, and so there's not as much work and role modeling and things like that. So we really think, that if you want more upward mobility, if you want to be able to move from the bottom fifth as a kid to the middle class as an adult, for instance, that's going to require a whole different set of policies. And we think that's a conservative insight. We think progressives are very in favor of mobility as well, but we think they're a little bit too focused on just giving out cash.
Yeah, and so let's look at and unpack a couple of those principles and strategies in terms of that upward mobility. Again, not just maintaining just above that poverty line, but how do we really help them climb in? You have always been my go-to resource when it comes to social capital and those institutions, and why those are so important, and why it's not enough to just have access to cash, but access to people and institutions. Describe that for us.
Yeah, for sure. So we highlight a number of important institutions in the book. I think, the sort of immediate and most important one is the family. And, if families are weak in the United States, then that's just going to provide a terrible base for kids to build on. And so we have a chapter from Brad Wilcox, who's at the University of Virginia and at AEI, and Robert Lerman, who's at the Urban Institute, where they talk about the decline in the family and policies to strengthen families. Another set of institutions that we talk about are educational institutions. Clearly, these are, the big institutions that we've got for trying to increase opportunity in the U.S. So we have a chapter on early childhood education. We have a chapter on K through 12. And we have a chapter on post-secondary education. And then we also look at the importance of place. We've got a chapter that's specifically about investing in low-income places and helping kids move to places that are going to provide more opportunity for them. And then we've got a chapter on community violence also that emphasizes just how much of a barrier to upward mobility it is if you grow up in a dangerous neighborhood.
Yeah, being settled and confident in your surroundings is a big piece of that upward mobility puzzle. As you've gone through this process, and again, I'd love to be a fly on the wall as you and Yuval and Ryan went at this thing and started to pull that apart. There's always some moments in a book like this where you sort of have wow, I'd never thought of it that way. And I know one of the other things that you're all trying to do is to push it a little bit in terms of innovation, some things that may not work in the end, but are clearly worth taking a big old swing at. What were some of those surprising moments, and what are some of the things you're hoping to give a big swing at?
Yeah, we did think that it was important to emphasize innovation. I think, one of the great insights that conservatives have, I think, is that a lot of what government tries to do, and in particular the federal government tries to do, turns out not to work. We've got a lot of programs that have been very rigorously evaluated, and I wish the results on the whole were more promising. But I think we've got to start from realism that a lot of what we've tried hasn't worked. That said, we argue that shouldn't stop us from trying to find solutions that do scale. And I think the way you do that is you kind of let 1,000 flowers bloom in a bunch of places. So, for instance, with early childhood education, Chester Finn recommends that parents get, either vouchers or education savings accounts or tax credits that they could use, to find the best matches for their kids in terms of what they need for early childhood education. These different approaches would need to be evaluated, and hopefully we would discover that some work better than others and some don't. Similarly, Beth Akers and Preston Cooper have a chapter on post-secondary education, where they're talking about holding schools accountable for their graduates' outcomes and for the extent to which they actually graduate people out into the working world. And so financial aid, federal student aid would be more generous going to places that have better outcomes for their students and less generous for other places, as a way of trying to get schools to think about, we're actually on the hook for doing right by the students that we're serving. So lots of experimentation along those sorts of lines that take advantage of choice, that take advantage of markets where we can, and that require a rigorous evaluation rather than accepting something like Head Start, which is pretty entrenched in federal policy but doesn't really have great results to show for it.
Great perspective as always. The book is called Doing Right by Kids, Leveraging Social Capital and Innovation to Increase Opportunity. To me, that's what it's really all about. It's opportunity and upward mobility, and social capital is the key to all of that. Scott Winship, of course, is Senior Fellow and Director of the Center on Opportunity and Social Mobility at the American Enterprise Institute. And Scott has tag-teamed with Yuval Levin and Ryan Streeter on this book. And it is an important read to get to that innovation component that can change the game and, more importantly, change the results, especially for our young people. Scott, as always, thanks so much for joining the show today.
Yeah, thanks, Boyd. Always a pleasure.
All right, that's Scott Winship again from AEI. An important book, Doing Right by Kids, Leveraging Social Capital and Innovation to Increase Opportunity. Results matter, and we got to get our young people especially, not just giving them exactly what they need to stay exactly where they are. We got to give them a path and a process and some support to get where they actually want to go. We'll be right back.
Hi, my name is Kendon Holdaway, and I work for the National Kidney Foundation of Utah and Idaho. Before that, I worked as a dialysis technician at the largest dialysis center in Utah. And before that, I was diagnosed with chronic kidney disease at age 14. However, I am one of the lucky ones. I have an amazing mother who gave me a second chance. She donated her kidney to me, and it changed my life. Thanks to her and a scholarship from the Kidney Foundation, I was able to graduate college, get married, and apply to medical school in hopes of becoming a doctor. Sadly, there are many who are not as lucky as I am. Every car you donate to towcars.org gives hope and help to 3,000 patients like me, many of whom are still waiting for their miracle. Towing is free and donations are tax deductible. Keep donations local by donating online at towkars.org. That's towcars with a K, like kidney.
You trust us for news and information in your car. Now trust us at home. KSL News Radio has you covered, keeping you informed on the latest breaking news, weather, traffic, sports, and more. Listen on your Amazon Echo or Google Home device. Just say, Alexa, open KSL News Radio, or listen on the KSL News Radio Listen app. Text the word app to 57500. KSL News Radio. We have you covered.
At Common Spirit Health, we know that lifelong health and well-being starts with primary care. So we have doctors and providers who see you, hear you, know you, and understand you. Because understanding you means understanding your needs. And that leads to a deeper knowledge of the prevention, wellness, and treatment options that may be best for you. It's primary care that treats your whole family like family. It's primary care with human kindness. Discover all the ways you can find and connect with a primary care provider at mountain.commonspirit.org. Nearly 70% of Utah's land is controlled by the federal government, severely limiting Utah's ability to actively manage and protect our natural resources. Our families, businesses, and communities know there's a better way. Utahns have been good stewards of our public lands for generations. That's why we're asking each and every Utahn to get informed, speak up, and learn more at standforourland.utah.gov.
Doorbuster deals are coming during Pro Savings Days at Lowe's. Starting September 16th, save on a DeWalt 12-Volt Max Extreme Drill Driver Combo Kit or a DeWalt 12-Volt Max Extreme Impact Driver. Your choice for just $99. Plus, save $80 on a Bosch 18-Volt Brushless Cordless Impact Driver. Was $179, now just $99. Shop these deals and more before they're gone, because Lowe's knows pros. Valid 9/16 through 9/18. Selection varies by location.
Mom, meet Sarah.
From first-time Nana moments.
Yeah, welcome to Flight 101.
To annual girls trip moments. Your can't-miss moments are worth protecting against RSV. If you're 75 or older or 60 plus with a chronic condition like asthma, COPD, heart disease, or severe diabetes, you're at higher risk of landing in the hospital from RSV. And there are no prescription RSV treatments. Check eligibility and schedule your RSV vaccine at vaxassist.com.
So where should we go next?
Sponsored by Pfizer.
Attention pet parents. Tired of being a doorman to your furry friends? Say hello to Utah's own Pet Door Products. Your ticket to convenience and freedom. Visit petdoorproducts.com. That's petdoorproducts.com.
Victor deployed for the first time to Afghanistan in 2003. At 4 in the morning, my phone rang. They said, "I regret to inform you that your husband was wounded in action." Victor sustained a moderate traumatic brain injury. I was doing school full-time, and I was also then caring for Victor. One of the most important elements of caregiving is taking care of yourself. I just didn't want to forget that I also had goals and that I also had a life. What I did is I challenged Victor to meet me halfway. There are almost 6 million military and veteran caregivers across the nation. We have our own journey, and we can fulfill that journey at the same time that we are helping our loved one.
Visit aarp.org/caregiving for a free military veterans guide to navigate your caregiving journey and better care for your loved one and yourself.
Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
I'm Dave Cawley, investigative journalist and host of the podcast Cold. Don't miss Cold's new Season 3, where I look into the unsolved disappearance of Cherie Warren, a woman last seen leaving her job at a Salt Lake City office in 1985. Police cast suspicion on Cherie's estranged husband and boyfriend, but never made any arrests or recovered Cherie's remains. Find Cold Season 3, The Search for Cherie, anywhere you get your podcasts.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, Utah's NHL Hockey Club says it's ready for its first preseason contest this weekend. Second, the Federal Reserve announced a 0.5% cut in its key interest rate this afternoon. Third, a couple dozen people were hurt in Wisconsin when wagons on a hayride rolled over. Right now, 68 degrees, mostly cloudy in Salt Lake City. Back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Get deeper insights on the news from Inside Sources.
I know it's often easy to get lost in the politics of everything going on in our nation's capital, but there is some governing that actually goes on there as well, and some important things that do impact us right here in the state of Utah. As we continue to say, Utah is not just a crossroads to the west, but a crossroads to the world. And the business of Utah is really leading the charge in terms of expanding out as well as strengthening within the state. A delegation of Utah leaders is headed to our nation's capital next week to advocate for Utahns, discuss solutions and some of the most pressing issues facing our state today. Really thrilled to have back on the program with us Derek Miller, of course, is the president and CEO of the Salt Lake Chamber and Downtown Alliance. And Derek, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Boyd. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
All right, so we know you got a group of business executives, community leaders heading back to D.C. to meet with the members of the congressional delegation. Give us a couple of the high priority things that you're looking at in terms of things that might happen in D.C. that will impact us right here at home.
Well, as you know from your time in Washington, D.C., there's always something going on, for better or for worse. It's the nation's capital. It's the power center. And sometimes it's important that we take a little bit of Utah back to Washington, D.C., and so that's exactly what we're going to do. We've got about 70 business leaders who are traveling with us next week, and we will be meeting with our congressional delegation as well as some other experts in important topics like AI, and we'll have an immigration roundtable. We'll be meeting with our colleagues at the U.S. Chamber, and everything that we talk about is really going to be focused on what Utah has done to create a prosperous and inclusive economy, and how the elected officials and powers that be in Washington, D.C. ought to be following our model.
Yeah. As you look at some of those things that are popping up, one of the things that, of course, is always of interest in the Utah business community are the trade policies. We know both the Harris campaign and the Trump campaign have been talking about tariffs and those kinds of things. What is the approach? What is the conversation to be had when it comes to some of those trade policies?
Well, this is important from a couple of aspects. And one is, as you mentioned, tariffs. On one hand, we understand that tariffs really increase costs to consumers. And so in that regard, it's not a good thing to get into a trade war. On the other hand, you have some countries, and let's just name names while we're talking, and point to China, that does a lot of dumping of goods. They do dumping of goods in the energy industry. They are now getting into the area of dumping goods in the vehicles, specifically electric vehicles. And they've been doing dumping of goods in consumer products, some of these which are important to Utah businesses. Many of them are important to Utah businesses. We think about great companies here like Maloof, Walker Edison, that are headquartered in Utah and that are involved in this industry. And so when you have a world trader like China that's not engaged in fair practices, and sometimes tariffs are exactly the kind of thing that you need to do to combat that. And so what our message will really be, hey, whatever we do, let's make sure it's tailored specifically for the problem and doesn't have unintended impacts on the consumers.
So such an important conversation. Another one that I think is really vital, and another area where I think the state of Utah has done well, and that's creating space, especially for our entrepreneurs and small business owners when it comes to regulatory overreach. I think the Utah delegation has also done a good job on this. What are some of the things that you're keeping your eye on, or again, some of the conversations to be had when it comes to regulatory reform?
Well, this is such an important topic because any business will tell you that as quickly as high taxes can kill their business, so can overburdensome regulation. And regulation is an important topic for business because on one hand, we recognize that it's needed to create level playing fields to protect consumers and to protect things that are important to us all, like water and the environment. But too often we see that these regulations that don't serve any public purpose or have any common good, they really just gum up the works of commerce. And what we've done in Utah that you referenced, Boyd, is we've gone through regulatory reform. We did it when I worked for Governor Herbert. We did it and continue to do it under Governor Cox. And we've created a regulatory sandbox, which allows companies to come in and say, hey, here's a creative way that we could do this differently and allow the public to give input that way. I can't think of anything that would unleash the power of free enterprise to create jobs and to increase prosperity in this country that if the federal government would follow Utah's example and just go through all the regulation that they have and ask themselves this simple question: why are we doing this? Yeah. And too often I think they'll find out nobody can answer that question.
Yeah, and often it's just been built up over time, or someone wanted to build their own little empire or kingdom somewhere, and that's often how it goes. And often it's because Congress either fails to do their job or they abdicate their job to some of those agencies that do that. And this is one of those areas. I was with a group of DECA students from across the state of Utah this morning, and we talked about this very thing and how even the founders of this country, even though we call them wise and noble souls, which of course they were really just a bunch of entrepreneurs and business owners who were tired of being overregulated and overtaxed. And so I think this conversation and this group that you're taking back to our nation's capital is one of the great things we export in this from this state to our nation's capital, the kind of thought leadership and the kind of Utah model approach to things that really does make a difference. Derek Miller is president and CEO of the Salt Lake Chamber and Downtown Alliance. Again, an important mission going back to our nation's capital to talk to Utah's congressional delegation on a wide range of issues. Derek, as always, we appreciate you coming on the show. We look forward to getting the report on the backside once you go to our nation's capital. We know it will be a better week in Washington next week because there'll be some thinkers and doers back there. We hope you get a lot done.
Well, thank you, Boyd. We've only scratched the surface of the things that we'll be talking about and advocating for back there, and so I'll look forward to talking with you more about it.
Awesome. We'll get a good report. We know some of those things on your to-do list back there are housing affordability, trade policies, regulatory overreach, and a host of others. So we'll look forward to the report on that as well. Derek, thanks again for joining us today.
Thank you.
All right. Great insight there from Derek Miller, again, president and CEO of the Salt Lake Chamber and Downtown Alliance. He'll be heading back with a large delegation of business executives and community leaders for some crucial conversations in our nation's capital. Well, that wraps up hour number one of Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. We'll step aside for some top-of-the-hour news, but do not go anywhere. We are going to kick off the 2 o'clock hour with an uncomfortable conversation that I think is a crucial conversation. Stick around. We'll be right back.
KSL FM Midvale.
KSL Salt Lake City.
From the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios, this is KSL News Radio.
Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
It's 2 o'clock at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top story this hour. In response to some recent reported cases of ritualistic abuse, where groups or individuals engage in systematic manipulation under the guise of spiritual beliefs, Utah lawmakers are refining legislation to help tackle that problem.
Both to punish and to prevent such action, and to set the policy for the state that this is just simply not acceptable.
That's Representative Ken Ivory explaining the amendment clarifies the distinction between ritualistic abuse and other forms after gathering feedback from survivors and advocacy groups. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. 2 hay wagons loaded with adults and children rolled over at an apple orchard in Wisconsin this morning. The passengers on the hayride were on a field trip from an elementary school in Eau Claire. 25 people had to be taken to local hospitals. The Federal Reserve appears to be ending its years-long fight against inflation by cutting a key interest rate. Here's ABC's Alexis Christoforous.
As for what it means for consumers, it's going to take some time. We're not going to feel the impact of just one Fed rate cut. And in fact, there are already predictions that we'll get 2 more rate cuts this year and perhaps as many as 4 next year. And that's when we're going to start to see that cumulative effect of those interest rate cuts on things like credit cards, auto loans, and of course, mortgages.
That rate cut is 0.5%. The Dow Jones average responded quickly, but is now down on the day, 103 points. And the NASDAQ is down 54 right now. And our KSL weather looks like clouds are breaking up, the sun coming out. That's next. KSL News Time, 2:01.
It's a priority for us at this station to bring you all sides of a story and to talk about the news fairly, completely.
Get all the facts and be really aware. Utah's Morning News with us, Tim and Amanda.
Weekday mornings 5 to 9 on KSL News Radio.
If you ordered a steak sandwich and they served you bologna, you'd be ticked off.
B-O-L-O-G-N-A or B-A-L-O-N-E-Y. It doesn't matter how you spell it. It's still bologna.
Hi, this is Jason.
And Kathy of Window World.
We could go on and on about Window World, but folks, it's all about you.
Your home and what you need.
Window World is America's #1 window replacement company.
Call Window World at 801-281-8111.
Or check windowworldutah.com. And as Doug always said, that's no baloney.
At Macy's, we're proud to be local and support local. Carrying local products and produce is important to us. We are proud to support our local growers and bring peak freshness to you and your family. To make shopping local easier for you, we have added Utah Proud tags beneath local products. As you shop our stores, look out for the tags as you shop and show your pride for local Utah companies and growers. Thank you for shopping local yourself by shopping at Macy's. Macy's, happy shopping!
In 2024, dating is a disaster. We've been ghosted, breadcrumbed, stuck in situationships. Hi, I'm Debbie. I'm Caitlin. Welcome to our new podcast, Dating at Her Age. Dating has been so dicey for us, so we asked KSL, can we launch an all-new podcast about it?
People use these dating apps. You're not really dating when you're on the dating app.
Dating at Her Age, brought to you by Mountain Home Services. A new episode drops every Thursday on KSLNewsRadio.com.
Dave and Debbie.
It's impossible to digest and consume all of the news that's now coming at us through either social media or through web pages or through the radio. Pick what is most impactful in your life and focus on that. And that's what Dave and I do every single morning. We pick those issues that are most important to our listeners and we boil it down so it's digestible. It's simple to understand.
I think we're trying to find the essence of the story. You know, you can't be an expert on all things, but that doesn't mean you can't be curious and really find out more and educate yourself and learn the complexities of an issue. But I think all of us start at ground zero on everything. Ask questions, show that curiosity.
And then if you need more research, you can always go to KSLNewsRadio.com and learn more.
Listen for Dave and Dejanovic 9 to noon on KSL News Radio.
Traffic and weather together brought to you by Sinclair's Dino Pay app. Save up to 20 cents per gallon. Here's Ricky Meese.
Well, for those who are traveling any of the Valley freeways, you're good to go. We still have the cleanup, the final cleanup of some earlier debris at the on-ramp to northbound I-15 at 146 South. Murdoch Hyundai is celebrating 3 brand new dealerships with 1.99% for 5 years on the Tucson or Elantra. Murdoch Hyundai in Logan, Linden, and Murray. MurdochHyundai.com. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
Partly cloudy and cool with a chance of rain later today, but mid-70s through the rest of the week. Today's high around 71, 70 degrees with mostly cloudy skies right now. I'm Dan Bomas from the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios. Listen online at kslnewsradio.com. We're Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Well, the headlines this week have centered on a second assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump. We want to get underneath those headlines and look at the response of Americans to those assassination attempts and what they actually reveal underneath the numbers. In a rarity for me, I have actually been more disturbed and troubled by the reaction of American citizens to these events than I am to American politicians' response. It's time to get comfortable with an uncomfortable conversation. Let's begin.
Think you know the news of the day? Think again with Boyd Matheson on KSL News Radio.
All right, so as we begin this conversation, I want you to settle in, and I want you to set your politics aside for a moment, regardless of where you fall on the political spectrum, because we're going to look at the numbers, we're going to look at what's happening, and most important, we're going to look at the big thing. What do we do next? And what's our responsibility in all of this? I'm going to walk you through a little bit of the backstory and the process as well. A new survey has revealed these deep-seated kind of contempt in the nation. And we find it in Americans' views on the assassination attempts of former President Trump and how closely they are connected to party affiliation. Now, let me walk you through the backstory. Late yesterday, I received some polling data, some new information that was about to be released this morning. So that's called an embargoed copy, some embargoed information. So I had some information from our friend Scott Rasmussen, who heads the Neapolitan News Service and, of course, RMG Research, a longtime pollster in this country, someone I trust to not just get to the numbers, but to get to the counter-polling that really shows what the American people believe in all of this. So I received this polling data late yesterday, and I will confess it was disturbing to me. It was frustrating to me. It was even a bit of a gut punch in some ways, and some of the data that we'll get to in just a moment. And I felt the need to just start to write, and so I did. I wrote well into the night, and then early this morning, with our help from our tag team partners over at Deseret.com, published a piece, a perspective, what the assassination attempt tells us about ourselves. And so this was my process going through, and I want you to do the same. And as we go through the numbers, and as we go through some analysis, don't do the instant certainty. Don't start pointing fingers and placing blame. No yeah buts. I just want you to listen to the context of these numbers, and then let's try to get some perspective about it in terms of what we do next. So, new survey released today, just this morning, by the Neapolitan News Service. It was conducted just in the last few days, September 16th and 17th, by Scott Rasmussen and RMG Research. And this is what they found in the context of these assassination attempts on former President Trump. 52% of Republicans, 52%, think it is at least somewhat likely that the Democratic Party or the Kamala Harris campaign was involved in the assassination attempt. 28% say it's very likely. So that's a Republican point of view. That there is 52% of Republicans say, yeah, the Democrats or the Harris campaign were probably involved in these attempts or plots. Now flip the script. 49% of Democrats think it's at least somewhat likely that Donald Trump himself or the Trump campaign was involved in the plot. In other words, they staged this for political purposes. So half of Republicans and half of Democrats think that these assassination attempts were done by their political opponents. And so that's a little predictable, right? predictable that those affiliated with a particular political party, they would see the assassination attempt differently. That's normal. But to me, the critical thing is that the survey lays bare some deeply, deeply concerning levels of deep-seated contempt in this nation. Both sides have absolute certainty that the opposing side is not just wrong, they're wrong and evil. Now, here was the gut punch for me, stunning and staggering. Of the 1,000 people that were surveyed, registered voters, it revealed that 28% of Democrats believed America would be better off if Trump had been killed. Another 24% weren't sure if that was a good thing or a bad thing. So that means fewer than 48% of Democrats could bring themselves to say, no, America wouldn't be better off if the opposing candidate for president was assassinated. Now, lest any Republicans feel personal justification or righteous indignation that the Democrats would be so divided that 48% couldn't say this was a bad thing, I'm quite certain if the script were flipped and Republicans were asked about whether the death of the opposing candidate, in this case Kamala Harris, would make America better off or not, the numbers would be sadly and eerily the same. Scott Rasmussen told me, he said, it's hard to imagine a greater threat to democracy than expressing a desire to have your political opponent taken out or killed. So where does that leave us? That's an uncomfortable conversation. The fact that we even asked that question, that the question had to be asked, do you think the assassination, if it had been successful, would have been better off for the country? That is telling. That is staggering to me. That's a gut punch to our constitutional republic and to the citizens all across this country. So here's the sad thing for me. This second assassination attempt on the life of the former president and Republican nominee has produced a little more than a pause and a prayer. It's like a young teenage Utah driver at a stop sign. Pause and a prayer. And that pause and a prayer was the only thing that happened on the campaign trail and among most Americans. How can it be possible that our nation seems to have so little interest in pauses or prayers these days, or in pursuing conversations, uncomfortable as they may be, that could cure the contempt that is found in so many places and spaces in our society? It was stunning to me. After this second assassination attempt, both the Harris and the Trump campaigns continued campaigning with full blitz media advertising, massive fundraising appeals, and all their regularly scheduled rallies. If there was a pause in the political sphere, it was just long enough for some good old finger pointing and placing of blame, along with the very usual posture in Washington to shrug your shoulders and say, well, it's not my job and it's not my fault. And I think what was most noticeable by its absence was authentic leadership. Now, Scott Rasmussen also told me that these results are just the latest evidence of how polarized the electorate has become in this election cycle. Voters for both Trump and Harris overwhelmingly say that they can't understand how a reasonable person could vote for Donald Trump or how a reasonable person could vote for Kamala Harris. In other words, they're saying anyone who disagrees with who I'm going to vote for is not just wrong and unreasonable, they're wrong, unreasonable, and evil. Now, our nation has experienced all kinds of seasons of anger and division and actual assassinations and assassination attempts throughout our history. And many of these moments have been seared into the souls of Americans that are old enough to remember them. But in the wake of such violence, America has always found a way to come together, has always galvanized the goodness that makes our country great. And then they've been able to access that binding power of the principles of liberty. The challenge today in our race and chase, it seems that history has fallen below the horizon for so many. And it seems that we have become a society past feeling when it comes to those with whom we disagree. I have long said that a society that loses its ability to feel compassion or see dignity and even a spark of divinity in others is in danger of losing a great deal more. But the lessons of history and the principles they contain, I believe, hold the keys to better days for this country. Now, yesterday we celebrated Constitution Day. On that same day, September 17, 1787, George Washington sent the Constitution to Congress. In doing so, he included a letter. And I believe the letter that George Washington sent along with the Constitution that had just been freshly finalized might be even more inspired and more instructive to our current circumstances than it was to the Congress of the fledgling nation in 1787. Listen to this. This is what Washington wrote as he closed out this letter. He said, "In all our deliberations on this subject, we kept steadily in our view that which appears to us the greatest interest of every true American, the consolidation of our Union, in which is involved our prosperity, felicity, safety, perhaps our national existence. The important considerations seriously and deeply impressed on our minds led each state in the convention to be less rigid on points of inferior magnitude than might have been otherwise expected. And thus the Constitution, which we now present, is the result of a spirit of amity and of that mutual deference and concession which the peculiarity of our political situation rendered indispensable." So here's the takeaway. According to George Washington, we could change the current level of contempt in our politics and in our society by first keeping steadily in view the things which are of greatest importance to every American. Let's keep our eye on the ball. 2, being less rigid on points that don't matter. We do not have to dig in our heels on every issue. And just because your political opponent is for something does not mean that you have to be against it. 3rd, possessing what Washington called the spirit of amity. We call that friendship. 4, giving mutual deference. We call that dignity and respect across our differences. And 5th, and finally, offering concession. In other words, being willing to do that hard thing we call compromise. So what George Washington was really saying about the miracle of Philadelphia that produced the Constitution that he was sending to Congress was that the secret sauce for the miracle of Philadelphia was friendship, dignity and respect, and compromise. Those are transformational principles America desperately needs in very difficult times. So rather than celebrating violence against opponents or casting aspersions on their motives and actions or judging them as evil or mad, we would do well to look in the mirror and ask ourselves the uncomfortable question, and then pivot our focus to the principles, not the politics, the principles that founded and forged the most extraordinary nation that we call America. It's also interesting to note, looking back at some other RMG research, you want to talk about things that America agrees on? 82% of Americans believe the United States was founded on the ideals of freedom, equality, and self-governance. 93% of Americans want leaders to unite the nation and actually believe that America's founding ideals of freedom, equality, and self-governance are a good foundation for bringing people together, unifying the nation in the same way George Washington did 237 years ago. You can't get 93% of Americans to agree that the sky is blue. And yet we all agree that the principles of freedom, equality, and self-governance would actually help unite the nation. The Constitution will do that as well. So we believe in that. So in the wake of assassination attempts, political violence, both physical and verbal and online, especially as the 2024 campaign heads into hyperdrive over the remaining 48 days until the first Tuesday of November, we should at a minimum think again and pause and pray. And we should pause and pray for the ability and determination to remember and then apply the principles that have made and preserved us a nation. We'll be right back.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson.
Trade in your sewing machine, any model and any brand, and get 25% off a new machine.
Yes, up to 25% off. It's happening right now at Dave's Bernina in St. George and Provo. Take advantage of 1.9% financing for 48 months on certain machines.
And all machines are discounted. Amazing bargains on previously owned machines while they last that come with warranties.
And how about this offer? Buy any Bernina presser feet or big book of embroidery, quilting, or stitching, and get the second one 50% off.
It's time to get a new Bernina machine and see the difference. Trade in your machine and save at Dave's Bernina, 691 East St. George Boulevard and 2017 North 550 West in Provo. Don't miss the sale. Dave's Bernina.
Did you know magic is here? Come see the new Bernina 990. This is the most amazing revolutionary sewing machine in the world.
Get deeper insights on the news from Inside Sources.
Welcome back to Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. It is great to be with you today. As always, the United States is becoming more autocratic over time, meaning the leader or ruling party is slowly getting more and more political power and getting checked less and less. This isn't something that happens all at once. It's sort of like a bankruptcy. It happens a little bit at a time until it happens all at once. But it slowly builds that momentum, and most of us probably don't notice a whole lot of what's really going on. It is dangerous to our democracy and our constitutional republic. Really thrilled to have joining us on the program today Peter Pomerantsev, Senior Fellow at the SNF Agora Institute at Johns Hopkins University. And he's also the co-host of what we want to talk about today, Autocracy in America podcast. It's through the Atlantic, and you've got to check this out. It's hosted by Ann Applebaum and by Peter. And Peter, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Love where you're headed with all of this. It's so interesting to watch how autocrats build and kind of slowly undulate their way until suddenly it's everywhere, and then it's a little too late. But I want to get a little bit of the backstory of this podcast and what led you to this, and then we'll get into some of the specifics in terms of where you go from here.
Sure. I mean, as you can probably hear, I'm not entirely American, and my co-host, Ann Applebaum, we've both reported from around the world, and reported from places where democracies have slid into authoritarian regimes, or sometimes what's known as hybrid regimes, but where basically, rights start to be rolled back. And, it's a subtle process. It doesn't happen overnight. It's not stormtroopers on the streets. We all have this sort of, nightmare of Nazi Germany. It's not like that these days. It happens by little degrees. Authoritarians or wannabe authoritarians win elections. They're often very good at winning elections.
Yeah.
And then they slowly start to rig the system. And it's kind of a playbook. And we just really wanted to tell the story of how we see alarming signs in America, how it's happened in America before. There's a lot in the show about American history and how it works internationally, just so people start looking for the right signs. Because, there's a real temptation to either panic or just dismiss it all and say, oh, it could never happen here. Well, it could if we don't take care. And in some ways, it already is.
Yeah, no question about that. I was going to guess you were from Texas, Peter, but apparently not.
No, I'm from West Texas. I'm from West Texas.
West Texas, there. That makes a lot more
sense. A bit further west than West Texas, yeah.
Oh, I love that. One of the things that I love in your podcast is one, you really show that this is not some distant, philosophical conversation. It is happening now. And one of the things that we often point out on this show, and you drive right to the heart of this, and that is that often these autocrats, as you said, are great at winning elections. They're great at creating division, because when you convince people that they're too divided to deal with health care or something around education or security or borders or immigration, then you need an autocrat to get things done. And it seems to me that that's part of that slow process of autocrats moving in.
Certainly. When kind of like, when Americans sort of ask me, what should I look for? I go, actually look at your own feelings. The feeling of apathy, the feeling that democracy doesn't work, that doesn't come from democracy not working. That comes from authoritarian creep. That comes from, I don't know, we see it in America at the state level when you have the same parties winning elections at the state level, year after year because they've gerrymandered the states, and then not having to really think about the voters too much. They can just think about, financial interests they can serve. Or the spread of kind of like lies and falsehoods, which make people feel so confused. They feel they can't change anything. That's a classic tactic that I've seen in authoritarian regimes. So that sense that, the sense that democracy isn't working is actually because there's bits of authoritarian tendencies creeping in.
Yeah.
And, the great danger is you have that feeling. We all have it. You have that feeling that things just not working. Nobody's listening to me. And then instead of saying, okay, I want more democracy, which is the kind of good way to respond, you go, oh, let's burn the whole thing down. We need a strong man.
Yeah.
And so you get into this really bad cycle. And with every step you give up on democracy and start asking for something else, the further you get. So it's not that it gets worse by steps. It gets worse by kind of like multiple slides and degrees.
Yeah, no question. And so often, as in so many things, we run out of energy before we run out of opportunity. And there's so many in the country that have become so exhausted, so exasperated that they have disconnected from the political process. They're not voting anymore. They're not showing up because it's all just too much for them. And they're usually the people that you really want to engage. They're the people that are out there raising their families, working at their jobs, volunteering in their community, making a difference for their neighbor. But it's that exhaustion and that exasperation that I think is part of the strategy. And I know you've seen this happen in many places around the world with your experiences, places you've lived, places you've reported. Give us a sense of what else should we be watching for as frontline citizens, as we experience some of this. What's the therefore what? What should we be doing?
Well, look, it's in a sense the most challenging question. But before we we first need to look at the right problem. So let's take something really, really concrete. And again, something that's been totally normalized. And that's the dangerous thing, which is sort of dark money in politics. The idea that you could fund political movements in America without knowing who's behind them, but also this kind of system, this much bigger issue of a financial system, which is very, very, very typical of kleptocracies that I've seen across the world, in Russia and in many other places, where kind of the super rich can live in a different economic dimension. They don't need to pay the same taxes as you. They can keep their money hidden in opaque shell companies far away. Look, the really scary thing, that is something we've come to accept as normal. And it shouldn't be that way. We should understand who is behind the money that we see in politics. It shouldn't be possible to just spirit your money away so that citizens aren't part of the same democratic community, whether they're rich or poor. And again, we've completely normalized that. So, there's actually a huge fight in Congress around this. Really good bills by senators like Sheldon Whitehouse pushing for greater financial transparency. That's something that, would make a tangible difference to the way we understand the politics around us. It wouldn't be kind of like hidden forces manipulating politics, which make people feel really, really helpless. We'd understand who's trying to do what. And again, this is something which has become normalized. That's what worries me. I'm much more worried about that than, the specter of guys in jackboots and uniforms marching down the street. It's these little things that we don't even notice are eating away at our sense of agency.
Yeah.
So that's very important.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. This is a fantastic project, and Peter, we look forward to having you back as this continues to unfold. I think the work that you're doing on this particular podcast is so important for all of us. And again, I don't care what your political persuasion is, where you fall on the spectrum from left to right or anywhere in between. This is a crucial conversation that we have to have in this country. So check out the podcast. It's called Autocracy in America podcast. It's through The Atlantic. Again, it's hosted by Peter Pomerantsev and, of course, Ann Applebaum. And, Peter, we appreciate you joining us today, and we really look forward to having you back to continuing and staying with the conversation.
Thank you so much.
More Inside Sources coming up next. Stick around.
It's 2:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. Our top story this hour, we have breaking news. We're just now learning about a fatal crash involving a train and a Sprinter van near the Idaho border in Cache County. Utah Highway Patrol has confirmed the accident, but doesn't say whether the crash has impacted traffic or give any details now on the state of the train. We'll have more as soon as we can gather it for you. Students and parents in the Canyon School District can breathe a sigh of relief now after officials found that a threatening social media post was unfounded. A spokesperson for the district, Jeff Haney, says dealing with these unfounded threats causes a lot of problems.
It really does take away from the time that we have to be with students and engage them in learning. It also raises a lot of worries and concern in our community.
This post did not originate in Utah. It's been spreading all around the country. Haney says, if you see something, report it, but don't repost it. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. Ukrainian drones struck a large military depot in a town deep inside Russia overnight, causing a huge fire and forcing some residents to evacuate. That's President Volodymyr Zelensky praising the forces that conducted that mission. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average now down as trading closes today, 103 points right now, and the NASDAQ down 54. S&P 500 was down 16 points, even with today's announced rate cut from the Federal Reserve. And coming up, we've got clouds and cooler temperatures today, but that'll warm up. That's next. KSL News Time, 2:32.
Here's a way to get breaking news updates anywhere you go.
At the store or in a work meeting, you can get breaking news on your phone.
You can quickly read it, swipe, or click for more. It's super discreet, super fast.
That's the app for KSL News Radio.
Hercules First Federal Credit Union is the place to go for your financial confidence. Why? Because when you walk into Hercules First Federal Credit Union, you're not a number, you're not a statistic, you're not a transaction. You're a person. And your goals are what matter most. So right now, walk into Hercules Credit Union, get Gold Tier Checking. You'll earn points for travel with everyday spending. You'll have a free checking account. Love that. You'll also have a new promotional rate of 4.25% on the balance of your checking account. You'll earn points every time you use your debit card. Those points can be redeemed for cash back, for travel, and gift cards. You also get free credit monitoring, which is also important for your financial future. So again, you're not a transaction at Hercules Credit Union. You're part of the story. You're part of what's next. You can check them out in Taylorsville, Harriman, or Riverton, or you can always find our friends at Hercules Credit Union online at HerculesCU.com. That's HerculesCU.com.
In a world where ugly siding, leaky gutters, and inefficient windows are sapping homeowners of their will to live, one company must save us all. This year, join RGS Exteriors as it embarks on a mission to eliminate outdated home exteriors, one Utah home at a time. Every plank of old, ugly siding must be replaced. Every leaky gutter must be eradicated. Every inefficient, energy-sapping window must be vanquished. Once and for all. Begin your epic remodeling quest by calling RGS Exteriors for a free estimate. Discover how a heroic team of experts will save your siding, gutters, or windows for a fair, no-nonsense price. Call RGS Exteriors at 801-280-3110 or journey online to rgsexteriors.com. RGS Exteriors, coming soon to a home near you.
Everywhere you look, things are getting more expensive. So at Consumer Cellular, we're lowering the price for those 50 and up. Now you can get unlimited talk, text, and data for $30 a line when you buy two. That's just $60 a month for 2 unlimited lines. So if you're 50 and up, make the switch and save. Come on, you've earned this. Call 1-888-FREEDOM. Or visit consumercellular.com today. Requires 2 lines of service, age validation, and credit approval, subject to system and area limits, taxes, and other fees apply.
Mom, meet Sarah.
From first-time Nana moments.
Yeah, welcome to Flight 101.
To annual girls trip moments.
Your can't-miss moments are worth protecting against RSV. If you're 75 or older or 60 plus with a chronic condition like asthma, COPD, heart disease, or severe diabetes, you're at higher risk of landing in the hospital from RSV. And there are no prescription RSV treatments. Check eligibility and schedule your RSV vaccine at vaxassist.com.
So where should we go next?
Sponsored by Pfizer.
Any Hour Services free furnace sale is going on right now. If you haven't scheduled your free estimate yet, what are you waiting for? Call Any Hour Services today or schedule online at anyhourservices.com.
Traffic and weather together brought to you by Sinclair's DinoPay app. Save up to 20 cents per gallon. And here's Ricky Meese.
Freeway traffic in good shape, no accidents or delays, but we do have Salt Lake City PD on the scene of an accident downtown, clearing it at 300 West, 500 South. Experience fall in Cedar City. Colors featuring 4 scenic highways, Red Rock views in Cedar Breaks and Dixie National Forest, the Shakespeare Festival, hiking, mountain biking, and more. Begin your journey at visitcedarcity.com. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
Partly cloudy and cool with a chance of rain today, then mid-70s through the rest of the week with clouds off and on. And right now we're at 70 degrees with partly cloudy skies. I'm Dan Bomas from the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios. Listen online at kslnewsradio.com. We're Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
In an era of rapid technological advancement and educational innovation, online learning, of course, has emerged as a transformative force in higher education as well as K through 12. A groundbreaking study conducted at the United States Military Academy at West Point offers unique insights into the impact of online instruction on student performance and engagement, both important things. The findings present a cautionary tale for the future of education as institutions continue to brace digital platforms. We also need to make sure we critically examine the true costs, the benefits, the impact, and what online learning is doing to shape the next generation of leaders and thinkers. Really thrilled to have joining us back on the program today, Michael Kofed, an assistant professor at the University of Tennessee at Knoxville. He's an expert in the economics of education, K through 12 education policy, and higher education finance. And Professor, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Boyd. I appreciate you having me on.
This is an important thing. Of course, we saw the expansion of technology, and then, of course, the pandemic hit, and we poured gasoline on the model. And now we have a chance to actually say, now, what is really going on? So kind of give us the baseline in terms of what we saw in terms of the expansion of online, what that looks like, and then we'll start unpacking some of those results.
Sure. So online education has kind of been the new fad in both K-12 and higher ed, as you said. Many administrators are excited about or online education because you can teach more students at a lower marginal cost. So that's going to reduce costs for the university while being able to potentially reach more students and potentially help people who aren't able to come to campus to come and enjoy the benefits of a higher education. However, what has not been really done is, are the students actually learning the same as if they came to an in-person traditional lecture hall? And one reason that we might be a little bit suspicious of any kind of estimates before is that different students tend to sort into different modalities. So students who take online classes look very different from students that take in-person classes. And we might not know if it's the online versus face-to-face or the type of student that sorts in to an online class. And so without an experiment or random assignment, we really did not know the answer to this question.
Yeah, and so as you did that, really based on, hey, these are just standard classes here. This is not self-selecting who's in some of those online courses or rapid graduation, those kinds of folks. Give us a sense, first, in terms of what you found off the top, in terms of what happens in terms of the impact of online learning versus in person. And then I also want to get to some of those that get hurt the most in all of this.
Sure, yeah. So before I came to Tennessee, I was a professor of economics at West Point, the military academy as a civilian. And West Point is a very unique place in many ways. One way is because it's the Army. Students don't get to choose their class schedules. They don't get to choose their professors. Those are randomly assigned to them. So that makes West Point into a giant laboratory for social science research. During the COVID-19 pandemic, we had to struggle just like every other college in the country on how we offer school or offer classes while doing social distancing. So on my co-author team, we got permission to randomly assign the students to an intro to economics course, and they had to take the course either online or they had to take it in person. And we even randomized within instructors. So instructors were teaching both ways, and so you could control for instructor quality as well. And what we found was large gaps in the online learning. The students took the tests, the exact same tests, the same. They took them online, regardless if you were in person or face-to-face, so that essentially the only difference was the modality of instruction. We found reductions in learning, we found reductions in concentration ability, and we found that the connection between the teacher and the student deteriorated when they went online.
And then let's talk about you mentioned in your piece that it's kind of the equivalent of going from a B+ to an A- in terms of kind of the hard impact there. But I want to dig into who it impacts the most in terms of what the ultimate result is in all of this.
Yeah, sure. So what we found was that students who are the least academically prepared for college did the worst in an online class. So, for example, students that had to take an extra year of a community college before coming to West Point, or they'd been out of education for a while because they first served enlisted in the Army and then came to West Point, or they had the lowest SAT scores before they came to West Point, those were the students that bore the highest burden of the switch to online.
Wow. And so as you see that play out, to me, those numbers are the ones that really require us to think again about this whole online model. Again, a lot of benefits to it, to be sure. But then what do we need to do, and what do we need to do different so that we can maximize the benefit but minimize some of these pretty glaring problems or detriments that it can cause?
Yeah, I think one thing that we need to do is kind of push the pause button when we think about online learning. Like everything else, it's a trade-off. And so, for example, we might be able to reach more students that wouldn't have any education at all, but we need to understand that the product we're offering them will not be the same as if they could come to a traditional campus. So maybe with different pedagogy styles, with different kind of technologies, before we want to scale them up rapidly, we want to kind of give them the same rigor to see if they are actually effective. Many times in education policy, we think about inputs. For example, it's cheaper to do something, but we don't think about outputs. Is it actually going to be effective for the student? We don't want to focus on ideology. We want to focus on what actually helps students.
Yeah, the net results. Results matter, and I think that's what we got to make sure we're measuring in the right way, because it is, as you pointed out, a lot of institutions have said, wow, we don't have to build as many brick and mortar things, which means we don't have to fundraise as much, or we can extend the load that a professor will carry. So there are some real upsides there, but again, we have to go back to what is the purpose of all of this? What are we trying to do, and are we producing the right result?
That's right, and that's why I think some of the social connectedness results that came from this were very interesting to me as a university professor, because it forced me to think, what is the actual service that I'm giving my students? Is it teaching them things that they could learn on Khan Academy, or is it the relationship that I'm building with them that will help both their learning and their career prospects after college?
I think that's so important. We had an important conversation with Scott Winship from AEI earlier in the program today, talking about the social capital and that it's not always just access to money or even access to education. It's access to people and networks that is so important. I think that's one of those that we often leave out as we calculate the benefits of online learning. Professor Kofed, professor at the University of Texas at Knoxville, a great insight, great perspective, a good chance for us to think again about what we think we know when it comes to online learning so we can get to better results for the students. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Floyd. Always a pleasure.
All right, that's Michael Kofed, assistant professor at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. And that's an important one. Easy to skip over when we look at all the online learning benefits, and there are many. But we got to make sure we're Well, watching out for some of those things that might trip up a lot of students, especially those who may not be as prepared to go to higher education. We'll be right back.
Are you looking for a night of pure entertainment? Visit Abravanel Hall for the Utah Symphony's Pop Series. Each concert is special, featuring guest artists like vocalists and dancers set to rock, Broadway, or film music performed by the full orchestra. These genre-bending performances bring you pop culture with a symphonic twist. See the full lineup now. UtahSymphony.org/pops.
Bet you never thought about this before. Do you think you could survive as a family living month to month at poverty level? Well, could you? Community Action Services and Food Bank Circles Initiative presents the No Poverty Summit, September 19th from 9 to 4 at the Provo City Library. Participate in an immersive poverty simulation and discover how much it can change the way you think about poverty. You'll also hear from First Lady Abby Cox, former Utah State Senate President Wayne Niederhauser, Utah State House Representative Marcia Judkins, and Joanne Goldblum, author of Broken America and the founder of the National Diaper Bank Network and the Alliance for Period Supplies, about how we can create better opportunities for people to obtain financial stability. Tickets are $15 and are available at casfb.org. Community Action Services and Food Bank Circles Initiative actively assists those who need support to rebuild and transform their lives. Get tickets to the No Poverty Summit, September 19th, and learn more at casfb.org.
When you crash your car, you get it fixed. When your computer crashes, you get a new one. But what will you do if you've been saving in a 401k or an IRA and the market crashes? If you're in your 30s or 40s, you'll be just fine. But if you're in or near retirement, you could be in trouble. Mike Stevens and his team at Capital Wealth Advisors are here to help. They can run a risk analysis to see if you're too heavily invested in the market. Don't let the ups and downs of Wall Street control you or your retirement dreams. Call 801-210-5500 today to schedule your risk analysis with Mike Stevens and the team at Capital Wealth Advisors. That's 801-210-5500. Crashes happen. Question is, are you ready? Capital Wealth Advisors, 801-210-5500. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Advisory services offered through Capital Wealth Advisors, LLC, a state of Utah registered investment advisor.
Hi, I'm Rachel, and I have a serious heart condition called hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, or HCM. Some symptoms include being short of breath, feeling tired, or having dizziness or chest pain. I still had symptoms on my beta blocker, so I asked my cardiologist about any treatment advances. It was a breakthrough for me. That's why I'm working with Bristol Myers Squibb to raise awareness about HCM and to help others like me. Talk to your cardiologist today and visit hcmrealtalk.com for more information.
Sponsored by Bristol Myers Squibb.
Hey, pet parents! With Progressive's collision coverage, you get extra protection for your cat or dog, because there's nothing worse than seeing your pet hurt. Like when you see their face after accidentally stepping on their tail, and you say, "I'm so sorry, Mr. Pickles." But as you kiss his nose and rub his little belly welly, you know Mr. Pickles is thinking, "You betrayed me." Anywho, Progressive pays up to $1,000 in vet bills if your pet is injured in an auto accident. Learn more at Progressive.com and watch where you step. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Collision coverage subject to policy terms. Not available in all states.
We have 5 kids, 2 dogs, and we've bought 4 houses in the last 12 years. So our realtors helped us through the complexities of buying a house, the legalities of different property rights, right-of-ways, building concerns, or even ordinances, right?
If we were to try to do this on our own, we would have made a lot of financial mistakes. The realtor is now part of our family. She's who helps our family get to wherever our next chapter is.
Discover how a realtor can make a real difference at myrealtorstory.com.
Hey BYU football fans, this is Mitch Harper. Another BYU football game week is here as the Cougars are set to open Big 12 play against the Kansas State Wildcats. To get ready for the Big 12 lid lifter, visit your local Macy's grocery store for all of your tailgating needs. They have great prices on all of your favorite game day items like burger patties, made fresh dips, and more. And did you know your favorite tailgate foods are also now offered through Macy's Catering? They offer a wide variety of catering platters from smoked meats to wings and even desserts. Catering is available to order online or in store. So whether you're having a small or large party, Macy's has you covered. Never miss a deal when you sign up for the Macy's Rewards program and emails. Get the ad sent straight to your inbox each week.
Hi, this is BYU captain and defensive end Tyler Batty. It's football season again,
Make sure to shop your local Macy's grocery stores for all your favorite tailgate foods.
Get game day ready with Macy's. Happy shopping.
KSL offers the best daily newsletter in the state. It's the 3 things you need to know. Every weekday, we deliver quality and relevant content to your inbox. No ads, no spam, just the 3 things you need to know to be informed about the world around you. Subscribe today. Visit KSLNewsRadio.com or text the word inbox to 57500. That's inbox to 57500.
Common Spirit Health. Hospitals, clinics, and caregivers all connected to advance healthcare in Colorado, Kansas, and Utah. Healthcare with human kindness is here. Hello, human kindness.
Do you worry about how much someone drinks?
Do you feel angry or depressed most of the time? Do you feel neglected or unloved?
Do you feel you attract people who tend to be compulsive or abusive?
Do you have money problems because of someone else's drinking?
Are you afraid or embarrassed to bring your friends home?
Do you feel that if the drinker loved you, she or he would stop drinking?
If you answered yes to any of these questions, you are not alone.
More than half of all adults have a family history of alcoholism.
Not everyone trapped by alcohol is an alcoholic.
Families and friends are suffering too.
Al-Anon
and Alateen can help. Call 1-866-200-0223 or visit alanon.org/help.
Jeff Kaplan. I'm energized by breaking news. First of all, because it's right now, and second of all, because in many cases the audience needs to know. There's no more important service that we can provide, and I find it critically important to get more details to the audience as quickly as possible. There's nothing more energizing than that for me. Not at all. The most important thing we do is breaking news. I am gratified that so many people listen to me every afternoon on KSL, but what they don't know is that there are so many people behind the scenes making it happen, checking on the traffic, answering the phones, making the calls, talking to the newsmakers. They're out in the street, into the field to get the raw information, and then putting it all together so that I can sit in front of a microphone and be a source of information every afternoon. But there are so many people who make it happen. That's what you don't know.
Ride Home with Jeff Kaplan, weekdays 3 to 7 on KSL News Radio.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, 1 fatality reported in Cache County this afternoon after a collision between a van and a train. Second, a threat that worried parents in the Canyon School District turned out to be unfounded. It's actually been circulating around the country. Third, Ukrainian forces hit a weapons depot deep inside Russia using drones. 70 degrees, partly cloudy in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Hear elevated conversation on crucial issues. Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources.
Welcome back to Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. It's great to be with you today. As always, I am Boyd Matheson, and as we round out the program, I want to go back to the top of this hour, to an uncomfortable conversation that we got to get comfortable with in this country. If you happened to miss earlier in the program, I talked about what the assassination attempts that have taken place over the last month tell us about ourselves. And that's uncomfortable. If you missed that portion of the program, just go to KSL Podcasts, go to Inside Sources. You'll see it'll be posted there a little later this afternoon. And you can listen to the entirety of the conversation in terms of where we are and what happened. And so as we look at the reaction and the response from Americans after these 2 assassination attempts on former President Donald Trump, I said earlier today that it was a rarity for me as I looked at the response, a real rarity. I was actually more disturbed and troubled by the reaction of American citizens to those events than I was to the politicians' reaction to those events. That never happens. But some of the numbers that we looked at, I think, are just really telling, and we've got to rethink all of this. The obvious ones, 52% of Republicans think it's at least somewhat likely that the Democratic Party or the Kamala Harris campaign was involved in the assassination attempt. 28% say it's very likely. On the flip side, almost half, 49% of Democrats think it's at least somewhat likely that Donald Trump himself or the Trump campaign were involved in the plot to boost their political prospects. 21% say it's very likely. Now, that's not too hard to swallow there. It's fairly predictable that those affiliated with political parties are going to see something like an assassination attempt differently. But that's not the real issue to me. The issue to me is that when we look at the people we disagree with contempt, that we start to really believe that they're not just wrong, they're unreasonable, and they're evil. Now, that's a dangerous place and a dangerous space for us to be as a country. And so where do we go from here? That's the question. The therefore what, the think again moment for me is what do we do? And I found that answer very late last night as I was stewing on these numbers. I got an embargoed copy of these numbers very late last night. I started writing, knowing that these numbers were going to become public at 6 a.m. Utah time in the morning. And as I stewed on that, the thing I kept coming back to is, well, what do we do about this? How do we change this dynamic in our country? This contempt that's just killing us. And I go back, as I often do, I start looking to history. Where have we been before? How did we overcome it? And I think George Washington captured it in the letter that he sent along with the Constitution when it was finally finalized in Philadelphia. As he sent it to Congress, he sent a letter. And that letter's very instructive. He basically said, and I would echo all of these things today, looking at a contentious political cycle, an uncertain season when it comes especially to the presidency. Here's what Washington said, and here's what I believe, that we should keep our focus on the things that are most important. Let all the other stuff just fly past. According to Washington, we should be less rigid on things that don't matter. So no, you don't have to dig your heels in on every issue, and just because your political opponent is for something, it does not require you to be against it. You can actually find that rare air and radical ground of common ground. It's always higher ground, by the way, so you have to work for it. And then Washington gave 3 things that I think are really the magic, the secret sauce of the miracle of Philadelphia. I think they are the crucial components to what we need more than ever in our nation today. So Washington said that the miracle of Philadelphia, the Constitution, was produced because those in the room had a spirit of amity. In other words, they had friendship for one another, and they recognized we're all in this together. We're all on the same team. We may have different ideas of how to get there, but we're all on the same team. Friendship matters. A good friend, Reverend Teresa Deer, said, you need to make friends before you need friends. And those early patriots made friendships first because they knew they were going to need them later. Second thing Washington said is give mutual deference. In other words, make sure we can have dignity and respect across our differences. Washington said that was crucial, that was indispensable, that dignity and respect across our differences. And then finally, he said that you had to be willing to offer concessions. In other words, you got to be willing to do that magical, mystical things that seems to be demonized by political parties, and that is compromise. And that's the secret sauce from Philadelphia. I think we can do that in our neighborhoods and communities, and if we start there, it'll spread across the country, and ultimately it will be reinfused back into our nation's capital. So keep the most important things the most important things. Don't be rigid on things that don't matter. Build friendships and relationships, not transactions. Show some dignity and respect across the differences and be willing to compromise. I think that's worth thinking again about. The data's disturbing, but the answer is up to you and me. That wraps it up for Inside Sources today here on KSL News Radio. I'm Boyd Matheson. Thanks for joining us today. And as always, as you go out into the world today, make sure you see something that inspires, say something that uplifts, and do something that makes a difference.
KSL FM Midvale.
KSL Salt Lake City.
From the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios, this is KSL News Radio.
Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
And they're not going to be addressed today. Eye on the Hill. Let's begin our team coverage with KSL News Radio's Becky Bruce.
Members of the Government Ops Interim Committee tangled over presentation from a witness detailing some of those caucus night problems. Representative Stephanie Green